And you think no one will know. But there are two people who will know. Yes, two people. Your God and Hercule Poirot.
Hello there, and we are the Movie Meisters. My name is Kenneth.
And I'm Matt.
And we saw the movie
Murder on the Orient Express.
Murder on the Orient Express is an adaptation of one of Agatha Christie's mystery novels featuring the famous detective Hercule Poirot. And the movie stars Kenneth Branagh as Poirot. He directs. It's about Poirot getting on this train. There's a murder, and he needs to find out who killed the person. There's also a subplot about him viewing his ability to observe everything as a curse. So Matt, what do you think of Murder on the Orient Express?
Alright, so this movie gives me hope because as far as the mechanics of this movie as a procedural or a murder mystery, it was excellent. You have panning around a room with glass separators and people kind of go in and out of the shot based on the reflections of the glass, and it's just like, it's lovely and perfect. And
visually it's an amazing movie, yeah.
And I feel like the pacing was great and the acting was good, but it's marred by a fundamental weakness, which I feel is the weirdness of this plot.
Yeah.
Relative to other murder mysteries. I guess spoilers if you aren't aware of how Murder on the Orient Express works, but it's the one where we find out that it wasn't any of the suspects who committed the murder, it was actually all of them together.
That's right. Yeah.
And that solution to the crime really just fucks with the whole idea of a procedural or a mystery or a whodunit.
You were pointing out to me, so after we left the theater, it was the moment that you realize that two of the suspects have the same connection to the killer, you realize, alright, so at first it seems like maybe it's just a coincidence, but it's too much of one. That's where the movie starts to dip. Matt, I've seen another version of this movie before. In fact, this is probably the most adapted Poirot, Agatha Christie story. There have been two theatrical movies. I saw the other theatrical one with Albert Finney, and there were a whole bunch of great actors in it. Sean Connery, Ingrid Bergman, Lauren Bacall, a whole bunch of other great actors. So we both sort of have a history with like the Agatha Christie thing. So you used to watch, the Poirot TV show or something like that?
Great show.
And apparently they did adapt this for that show. There was even a Japanese adaptation where there's a Japanese Poirot. So yeah, this is a pretty beloved Agatha Christie Poirot story. And the big question I'm asking is kind of why? I do like the concept of a murder on a train, but sooner or later it's just like, okay, we know that it's everybody. It loses its steam.
So the train is a great setting because it's a very limited space. And so if you have some kind of evidence, like someone was there and they saw some little moment of the crime, it really restricts the things that could have happened.
Right.
Not a lot of people could have been there. They couldn't have been doing a lot of things. It constrains everything really nicely so you can kind of try and figure it out. Or if there's a twist, it can seem very significant because you could wonder how in the hell the murder could have even been committed during these circumstances. But I think the idea is you're supposed to slowly, and I don't know how it was done in the actual book because I've not read it.
Yeah, me neither.
But, you learn in the way you would during a normal murder mystery. Okay, it seems like this person did it, but then this piece of evidence proves that they couldn't, so then it shifts in this direction, and it keeps doing that for a couple of rounds until you figure out the meta mystery, which is none of these scenarios are possible, so everyone must be lying, and it must be some kind of collusion between everybody. And I don't know if this is the fault of the original writing, but that is not the way that it happens in this movie. So you learn too much too fast.
Yes. Yeah.
And thinking back on this movie, you learn way too much, way too fast, because right when Poirot gets on the train, his buddy in his compartment is like unsure, like, oh, are you sure you're the guy in my compartment? Like, he knows that's supposed to be somebody else in his compartment. And when the murder happens and Poirot gets down to the mystery, the conceit of the thing is that that guy would only have known one other person on the train, which is not whoever was supposed to be there instead of Poirot, right?
Right.
So already, if you were really paying attention to this movie, from the very beginning, you know that that guy is in cahoots with somebody else.
Yeah.
And since there is no reason that he would have to know anybody else on the train. Then it's like people are conspiring to murder this dude.
Well, see, very early on, Poirot meets Ray from Star Wars and a doctor guy, and the two of them say, oh, it'll be over after this trip, or something like that. We are meant to think that it's a red herring, but it's a red herring of a red herring, where they're actually talking about the murder.
Right, so when you see that, you think, oh, it looks suspicious, but it's going to turn out to be something where they're like in this forbidden love because America hates black people, and so they're really innocent the whole time. But it's like nothing matters. Nothing matters. Everything, maybe it's better in the novel because you can take your time and go through all the theories and they all seem plausible, but then they get contradicted and you get this meta theory of how they all work together. But in this, it's just like you're setting up payoffs, and then none of the payoffs matter because it just gets all thrown out the window. And it gets thrown out the window too early because you learn too early in the movie that more than one person knew the true identity of the guy who was murdered. And it's too much of a coincidence.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking to yourself, either this movie is dumb, and it's a huge coincidence that two people on this train knew who he really was, or they were working together.
Yeah, and before you know it, it seems like every suspect has this connection to the killer. It's the same kind of connection where they were a friend or family member who wanted revenge. Everything at the beginning was about developing Poirot's character, and I found that to be the most interesting stuff in the movie, and his interactions with these people.
It is the imbalance of the...
But eventually it gets to a point where the train stops, they're trapped, and he starts interviewing each suspect one by one. The pacing just took a big drop off for me, where it's just like, alright, I know how this is going to unfold and it's not that interesting. But the thing is, I'm sort of asking myself this question. With other detective stories where you don't initially know who the killer is and then you're surprised at the end, some of them are very rewatchable for me. Movies like the Thin Man movies. I rewatch those movies because they're interesting, the character dynamics are fun, there's a lot going back and forth, and you can sort of glean little extra clues that you didn't realize before. So watching it again, it's like, oh, that makes even more sense. If I'm following along, I can sort of figure it out on my own if I was a little more observant like the detective. With the case of this, it seems like at the very end, he's pointing at each of the suspects. Oh, you're related to them like this. You're related to them like this. You're related to them like this. Beyond a certain point, it's like, well, how do you even know some of this stuff? Part of the fun with a lot of these classic detective stories is being able to sort of follow along and maybe even develop your own awareness of it. You don't get that from this story. For me, the most interesting parts were eccentricities of Poirot. That's what kept it together for me.
I don't know, even some of the Poirot stuff, it seemed like the very final bit of the movie was a really long, drawn-out exploration of why Poirot is doing what he's doing and whether or not he should turn in the culprits.
Right, yes.
And I feel like that just isn't set up at all. Like, I don't know what Poirot has some kind of mental problem with things that aren't straightened, or he has some kind of obsessive-compulsive tendencies. But what relation that has to bringing criminals to justice versus being merciful, I really don't know.
Yeah, there isn't a clear connection there. Yeah.
There's a whole thing in the beginning where we see the resolution of a case. It's like the end of a previous murder mystery novel, and we just get his big reveal where he shows all the evidence. That might have been an excellent opportunity to show why he is in favor of maybe bringing justice versus being merciful or whatever, so that it's a bigger payoff in the end. But it's really not. It's just like, there's a mystery and he solved it.
Right, yeah, we get this vague subplot for him where at the very beginning he's talking to one of the security guards and he just says, oh, I'm so observant of things and it makes me figure out who a criminal is, and it's a curse for me because I can't just turn it off. And then at the very end, his moral change was, oh, I have to constantly tell the truth. You know, it's my thing. And it's like, well, you know, when was that a thing? You know? Yeah, you're absolutely right. They could have set that up. They could have connected it a little better. It wasn't exactly clear, and I'm fairly certain that that subplot probably wasn't part of the novel. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but he comes across to me as like a Sherlock Holmes, where they're generally a static character, and the interesting thing is the case. I don't imagine this was something that was originally there, and in some ways it feels a little bit tacked on. The things that are interesting about him are his personality, but not this journey he's going on throughout the movie. Because I remember the old version, at the end he said, "Oh, you guys all killed this horrible guy. I won't turn you in," because he was a horrible guy. It seemed like it was a lot more casual in that respect. It didn't drag out the ending of him having to decide whether or not to turn them in.
I feel bad about giving this movie a thumbs down, though, because the setup is so good.
Yes.
And it just, the way he presents the previous case and the way he's so methodical, and it just feels like it's going to be a longer version of these, like I say, the television Agatha Christie serials, or like an episode of Columbo or something. Like, in fact, I feel like there's an episode of Columbo where he decides that an actress who had committed a murder and who was near death, he lets her off. And this is almost like that episode of Columbo is referencing this story. The bit about Columbo is, of course, he always notices that somebody has some logical inconsistency in their behavior, and they always wave it off as, well, you know, people act crazy, you know, there was a murder, people always act irrationally. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, I guess you're right, you know. And of course, we, as the audience, know he does not guess that they're right.
Right, yeah.
And there's this great bit in here where Poirot is interrogating the assistant of the murdered man, and then right at the end he says, oh, you know, maybe it was the Latin guy, you know how they are. And he says, oh, well, I thought you said you didn't judge people by their race. That's kind of weird. And he says, oh, I guess it's just some races and not others. And Poirot has a little aside, and he says, oh, and he was doing so well.
Yeah, that's great.
Like the logical, the irrationality, the logical inconsistency is what reveals you to be the murderer, right? Everyone tends to act in their own self-interest, and when there's some inconsistency there, that shows that somebody's lying.
You said you don't hold a man's race against him.
I suppose depends on the race.
That stuff is great.
Yes.
Like I said in the beginning, it gives me hope that there is space in modern cinema to do a police procedural murder mystery at feature length and have it be good.
Oh, totally agree. I would watch more movies with Kenneth Branagh directing and starring as Poirot. It just, this case in particular, doesn't lend itself to, I guess, theatrical presentation. Directing is so good, the performances are so good, it's just that ending that really kills it for me. Those are our thoughts on Murder on the Orient Express. Hope you were entertained by this. My name is Kenneth.
And I'm Matt.
And we are the Movie Meisters saying,
cinema is not a slice of life, but a piece of cake.
Thanks for watching.